Well, good evening, everybody. Wow, good evening, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And online, good evening to you too. We're about 50-50 in the room and 50-50 online, and we have some people who've not yet arrived in the room yet. And for all of you who get here early and find your favorite seat, thank you for doing so. And for all of you coming in, we know you'll get here as soon as you can. We've been very eager to welcome Mark Nepo here. And Mark, so glad that your health is fine and the virus you had that allowed you not to come in April is nothing more than just something that can be easily attended to. So glad for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for rescheduling. I got this middle of the night text from Mark that he was ill. Well, of course, that upset me. I got it in the middle of the night because I happened just to get up in the middle of the night and was not smart to check my cell phone when I got up. Maybe some of you find yourself in that situation too. So I was worried about you. And now so happy that we can be here. We can address saying yes to life. We can address this movement from brokenness to tenderness. Just very eager to know how you're going to handle all this with us. And what you do know, if you've been with us before, and many of you have been, a journey with Mark and what he plans is a really soulful journey. A very deep and wise journey where you do so much of the self-discovery. And it's done together with people whom you might be in dyad with or on your own reflections, your own journal time. Mark always says he's not the person with the answers. He's the person that's evocative to help you find the answers within you. What I say about Mark Nepo is he's a master teacher. He's a superb teacher, and some of you are nodding in real agreement. And you're back here again and again because that's your experience of Mark. So Mark and I were counting up. This is the 19th time he's come to Sophia Institute. And when we met him in 2008, introduced to us by Molly Lehman, who was on the board of Sophia Institute at the time, we knew we had just met our soul brother friend. You know how you know when you meet somebody and there is that connection. And so we just keep building on that connection and deepening that connection. And oh my goodness, in July you have this great book out called
You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship. That's the next book.
You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship. I love that. In a minute I'm going to ask Julian Buxton to talk about how we can pre-order it, but just in a minute. So we love that discovery and where that discovery takes, either through poetry or spiritual nonfiction that Mark also writes so masterfully. So it's always a deep dive with Mark, and yet the deep dive takes us into that interiority, yes, and out of it we hone so much, the treasure within us that's ready to be honed. And so you all always, Mark is so good about getting us to open our hearts and be very present. And that's a choice, of course, you make too, that's very important. So I encourage you to make that choice starting tonight. Tonight will be just the beginning, and tomorrow it will deepen even more. And then Sunday is when it really all comes together. So I hope you're also planning to be with us on Sunday. For those of you who are online, you're going to have, I believe it's 4 different tapes, Friday night, Saturday, part 2 and 3, and Sunday, part 4. So you can pick it up in meaningful doses. Those of you in the room with us will also have that too. So we're grateful for that. We're grateful to have you coming from places in Charleston, yes, and across the bridges and around town, other parts, South Carolina, other neighboring states, and some places not so neighboring. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, before I turn this over to Mark and say a little bit more about him, I want Julian to tell us. Julian is on the board of Sophia Institute, and he is also the founder of co-founder of Buxton Books, independent bookstore here in Charleston that all of us love. Julian, you want to say a word about how we can pre-order this book.
Yes. So, as Carolyn said, Mark is a superb teacher, and he is a great, great writer, which most of you probably already know. And if you don't, we have several of his great books. He's written many more than this. We've got a bunch of signed copies of Falling Down and Getting Up. Oh, we got some others too. And 7,000 Ways to Listen. And the new one's coming out on July 16th, right?
Yes.
And you don't have to go it alone. So Marissa is here to help us, and you can either do this code, which I'm not good at, or you can just tell Marissa, and she'll pre-order some for you. Also, Mark told me about an award the Half-Life of Angels received. Mark, will you tell everybody about that?
Oh, well, just before I got on the plane, the Half-Life of Angels, which is the book of poetry that some of you know from my 50s and 60s, was just awarded a Nautilus Award for poetry. So I was very grateful for that.
It's a big award.
Yeah.
Yes, very,
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you.
And there have been other big awards. And I said, now, Mark, it's hard for me to keep up. Every year I have to ask you, where are we with the numbers of books? This book that you can pre-order is number 27. Quite amazing. When we met Mark in 2008, I mean, you were counting the number of books that were published.
Not very many.
A lot. And it's just really...
And I was happy with that.
He's a passionate writer, and often when I'm checking in with him, he's in the business of writing. So, Mark is an award-winning author, and you might remember that he traveled with Oprah, that Oprah really, when she found the Book of Awakening, oh my God, and the book was 12 years old when she found it, it skyrocketed. She gave it amazing new life, and continue to have you on Super Soul Sunday and traveling around the country with her from time to time when she wanted to have a man whose work she felt was a compliment to her own be on stage with her. There's so much we admire about Mark, and there's a lot more to say. I do want to do a shout out to Virginia Shank, who's on Sophia Institute's board too. She's here. She lives in Atlanta and also has a home on Folly Beach. Some of you in the room are also on Folly Beach. So thank you both for being here with us. We want to thank Maureen Finan, who is completing her tenure at Sophia Institute for all the work she's done over the last 2 years. And glad she can be with us this weekend and has helped us traverse the movement from April for this event to this very weekend. So Larry Monteith for his work as our videographer. He's been doing that for years. And we are not using all the fancy-dancy equipment in here this time. We're keeping it pretty simple. So thank you again for being with us. I know we're going to have a life-affirming, very remarkable time together. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Let's welcome Mark Nepo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. And yes, it's wonderful to be here. I'm sorry I had to reschedule. Thank you for making the trip and those who are online. So this weekend, I also, yes, Carolyn and Hank have become family. And Hank's not able to be with us this weekend, but I want to dedicate the reading tonight to Hank, who's just an amazing, amazing soul brother, an amazing person. So I want to start this evening, and as an intro to the weekend, I do want to open up a heart space that we can enter together. And yes, I don't have any answers, I just have lots of questions. And the journey is to discover together. We just are here, we arrive here and nobody knows how to do this. And regardless of what anybody tries to tell you, there's no manual, there's no how-to. We simply compare notes on what works and what doesn't, and we try things out. And we keep each other company. So yes, the journey this weekend is saying yes to life from brokenness to tenderness. And I want to start with, I'll share like the first third of our time tonight. We'll be about 2 hours together. The first third I'll share things, then we'll have a conversation, and then the final third I'll share some more things as a way to bring us out. So I want to start, the first movement tonight is called Under All the Fuss. Under All the Fuss. And I want to start with a quote from Sir Isaac Newton. Now, Sir Isaac Newton, in his own lifetime, became pretty well respected and known. But toward the end of his life, he had this beautiful quote. He said, "I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, diverting myself now and then in finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell, while the great ocean of truth lay undiscovered before me." And that spirit of openness we sorely need, all of us today. So I want to start, this is a poem. In February I turned 73. When I met someone my age when I was younger, I thought they were ancient. And it doesn't seem so old now. And you know, not every birthday a poem doesn't come, but this came around that time. So it's called Turning 73. What do I know after all this way? That something enduring lives in each of us, that when released by love, can illuminate anything. What do I return to? To the mysterious fact that no one can live my life but me, yet I can never do it alone. What do I want? To keep parting the veils, to give without holding back, to listen with my heart. Where is heaven? In this moment now, as we drink from all that we are brave enough to admit. Now, one of the things some of you know from being with me before is I don't know where these are going, and that's where the creative process is very akin to the introspective process. If I am true to whatever the feeling is, whether it's a confusion or a wonder or a fear, then I am rewarded with an insight. And then I have to be with that as my teacher. So I didn't know it was going to end up there. But once it did end up there, I wound up looking into the word admit, which we know that's a very simple word, and yet it has two meanings. To admit is to confess or to honestly declare, but it also is to let in. And there's a relationship. When we are honest and authentic, that allows us to let things in. And when we let things in, it allows us to be honest and authentic. Where is heaven? In this moment now, as we drink from all that we are brave enough to admit, to confess and declare, and to let in, and to let in. And this is a poem called Under All the Fuss. And you know, when I was younger, like in college age, decades ago, I was, you know, when I first came upon my sense of the unity of things, it was a little disorienting, you know, and I didn't have a lot of people to talk about. I was in college. And so I think I talked too much, you know, because I would inquire about these things and people would kind of be like Seinfeld, well, good luck with all that, you know, and back away. And of course, I would talk more. But of course, through the years, as I've become realizing, and I have to say that one of the things that helped me realize that I was grounded in a spiritual way was reading for the first time a line in an essay by Carl Jung, where he talked about the poet and the artist as being a lightning rod for the unconscious. And I have since understood that the human soul, not just that we all are artists, whether we produce things or not, the human soul is a conduit for the larger forces of life. And once I read that, I said, no, I'm not crazy. I'm okay. This is all right. So this is Under All the Fuss. Over the years, I talked so much that like a car speeding down a dirt road, I couldn't see anything but what I stirred up with all my talk. Thankfully, Loss broke my axle and forced me to stop. When the dust settled, I could see. Then love picked me up and took me to the nearest town, where I started a school for seekers who talk too much. In time, we taught each other to listen like dragonflies who touch the water without making a ripple. Now, to listen is to breathe with my heart. Now I have so little to say that strangers think I'm a nobody when I'm finally becoming everybody. You know, over the years, when I talk about writing now, writing is listening and taking notes. Writing is listening and taking notes. And this is interesting because, again, akin to the individual process of the soul, of being a human being on earth, you know, we have this, you know this phrase, to learn something by heart. Well, in the modern world, we think that means to memorize it. That's not what learning by heart means. Learning by heart, that means when I am open and I admit the realness of things, of others or beauty or pain or whatever it might be, I don't memorize it. It's imprinted on my heart. You know, a lot of times people kindly say, gee, you have such a memory for these stories and quotes and all these things. Well, I haven't memorized them. They're there. They're there. If I am open and I'm touched, they're always there. They are the footprints on my heart. This poem is called The Antique Dresser. It was in the attic of my heart, one of those darkly stained cherry dressers with slender legs turned on a lathe and lacquered. It had a small keyhole, but no key. After all the years of opening and closing, the doors were slightly warped. I'd forgotten it was even there. But on this clear day, I felt at such ease, and the breeze made the dresser rattle way inside, so I went to see. The attic in my heart was cobwebbed and musty, yet the light from the world made the dresser look inviting, so I creaked the warped doors open, and pinned inside were all my grievances, unresolved, and all the pictures of those who had betrayed me and those I'd loved and lost in the storms along the way. For a moment, I felt the pang of it all. But as soon as the light flooded the dresser, all my sleeping grievances turned to birds and flocked from my heart back into the world. You know, one of the great paradoxes in life is that we must face what has happened to us, but we are more than what is done to us. We must face what has happened to us, but we are more than what is done to us. This is a newer poem called Where, Oh Where. You can travel to every major city, or climb every major peak, or read every book you can, or gather shells from every shore, or click those endless photographs with your wonderful phone, or journal your way through the interior, or meditate long hours to drop your thoughts as quickly as they arrive. None will help you arrive, but each will help you enter. None will help you arrive, but each will help you enter. You know, it's an interesting, we in the West, in the Western world, are fixated on this sense of arrival. But all the indigenous traditions and all the Eastern traditions, there is no arrival. The journey is where you are. And it really doesn't matter where you arrive if you're fully here on the journey. So an interesting example of this is that in the Buddhist tradition, one of the kind of more well-known things, there are a set of virtues that have been translated in English as the 10 excellent virtues. Now we can look them up in their beauty, truth, there are all kinds of things that we would imagine, just worded differently. But it turns out that in modern times, more contemporary times, when people have gone back and to see, well, how was that actually translated? When that was translated into English, it was not accurately translated. Because the word that was translated as excellent actually in Sanskrit means go beyond. They weren't the 10 excellent virtues. They were the virtues that were doorways through which you go beyond. So by being truthful, you enter another realm. You don't arrive at that. Big difference. Big difference. So this is a little story, a very short story called The Card. Krista found the card propped against her front door. It had her name on it. She sat in her favorite chair and opened it. There was no signature or note, no sign of who it was from. On the front of the card was a small mirror framed as a portrait. When she opened the card, the inside was filled with a painting of a woman sitting in her favorite chair holding the same card. As far as she could see or imagine, each mirror opened to a woman sitting in her favorite chair, opening another mirror to find another woman doing the same. Well, at first she chuckled, but it quickly became unnerving. What could this mean? She stared into the lineage of women looking beyond themselves in order to see others doing the same. Krista placed the card next to her alarm on her bedside, and during the night, she dreamt of the endless path of women looking beyond themselves. She tried to talk to the woman in the dream just ahead of her, who finally turned her head and said, "I am you and you are me. It's just that simple." The next day, Krista had coffee with her former husband, Ben. She felt funny talking about the card directly, and so she started their conversation by asking, "Do you think we're all at heart the same?" Well, Ben didn't dive easily into these waters, which is one of the reasons they eventually went their separate ways. But it was clear to Krista that Ben hadn't opened his mirror yet. From that day on, Krista looked for companions who had opened their mirrors. She yearned for conversation with those who had discovered the lineage in which I am you and you are me. Thank you. Thank you. Also, as I do every year, by the end of the weekend, the things that aren't yet published, I'll track and I'll send them to Maureen and Carolyn to share with you. I just ask you don't post them online, but I'm happy to share them with you. This is a very short reflection from a moment I had with my niece when she was 8 years old. We used to go to a lake in the Adirondacks in the summer called In the August Lake. I was wading with my 8-year-old niece in the August Lake when a pair of mallards came very close. We had nothing to feed them but our awe, and half thinking out loud, I told Jessica, "You know, duck is such a poor name for these colorful creatures." Well, she thought for a while, and then she splashed the water and said, "Featherbacks." I looked at her. She splashed again with glee and shouted, "We shall call them featherbacks." And I longed for her to look at me that way. and couldn't imagine what name she might give to the thing in me that wants to fly. So this is a reflection about the appearance of angels. The appearance of angels. More than little cherubs hovering with white fluffy wings, I think angels are more subtle. They assume a myriad of forms. As a 15-year-old in Auschwitz, Elie Wiesel saw a young boy hanged in the yard, and the sheen of light on his broken neck somehow kept despair at bay. Though it made no sense, that sheen of light, Wiesel said, was the appearance of an angel. And there was my immigrant grandmother with her 94-year-old body pressed into the hospital bed by almost a century of crossings. She felt a sudden clarity which let her see her entire life at once, and I believe that sudden clarity was the appearance of an angel that allowed her to rise up swiftly to tell me of the warm goat's milk her father would feed her as a child in Katerinoslav long before I was born. And there is the muffled yip of my yellow lab as she sleeps beside me, tickled by an angel who is letting her chase her favorite ball in the sun forever. So angels are sensitive, not persuasive. If we dismiss them as coincidence or as the conjuring of our own creation or worry, they will simply recede into the ocean of grace and wait for those loving enough or desperate enough to believe in forces larger than themselves. This is how we choose again and again, either to insist on what we want or to want what we are given. I think angels don't appear to help us out of here. They appear to help us stay here. So this is a poem called Under All Music. And if you're comfortable, I would invite you to close your eyes and then you'll open them during this poem reflection. You don't have to. Close your eyes and imagine all the heartbeats in the world thumping at once. The child lifting herself out of rubble. The wounded healer realizing he is not alone. The dancer yet to dance, knowing she is meant to dance. Welcome the heartbeats of all the animals now. The cows as they sleep, the coyotes howling, your dog dreaming of rabbits. Let them in. Let the underlying chorus sing. Feel your own heart now as a small drum in this endless symphony with no conductor. And when the beat is in your throat, open your eyes and let the symphony slip below your normal hearing again. Know it is with you everywhere.
We have banished the illusion of separateness.
Thank you. This is a poem called Stopped by All This, and I refer to a couple of people throughout history. One is Chomai, who was a Japanese ancestor of Basho, who was the great Japanese poet, and you'll recognize I mentioned Beethoven. So when Chomai, an ancestor to Basho, when he saw Kyoto burn in 1177, He was crushed, not knowing how to continue. And 500 years later, when Basho himself saw the pine-covered islands off the coast of Matsushima, he was leveled by its beauty, not knowing how to take all that beauty into his life. And when Beethoven heard the opening of the Ninth Symphony flutter in his consciousness like 1,000 birds returning home, he trembled, not able to ink the notes fast enough. It makes me think of the fawn we saw a few years ago, sleeping in a bed of orange leaves. After that, it was hard to return to the world. There is a pause under everything that, if entered, will unravel the knot in your heart. There is a pause under everything that, if entered, will unravel the knot in your heart. And that's part of saying yes to life, is when that pause presents itself, to welcome it. But we all have our patterns and our histories and the things that prevent us from welcoming that pause. So this poem is called The Tired Guard. You know, we all know that we all have an inner critic. We all have Borges, the great Argentinian writer, talked about it as the watcher. He always was followed by this watcher in his head, this damn watcher. So this is the guard, the tired guard. Who is the largest voice inside your head that is not your own? What are the commands you wrestle with that seem to come from nowhere? What can you do to regain the questions you were born with? Like a soldier who is surprised to learn that the war is over, has been over for years, what weapons can you put down so you can live? Let me read that one again. The tired guard. Okay, it's back on? Okay, sorry. The tired guard. So, you can tell the guard, you know what? Take off. Go to the beach. Right? Relax. Who, and this first question, I would invite you, I'll do this throughout the weekend, I'll give you take-home invitations to journal with, and then eventually to have conversations with dear loved ones or friends with. So this is a question. Who is the largest voice inside your head that's not your own? I invite you to journal about that. Who is the largest voice inside your head that's not your own? So let me read this one. Again, the tired guard. Who is the largest voice inside your head that is not your own? What are the commands you wrestle with that seem to come from nowhere? What can you do to regain the questions you were born with? Like a soldier who is surprised to learn that the war is over, has been for years, what weapons can you put down so you can live? So I have a couple of more, and then we'll have a conversation here. 3 more, I think. So this is a moment in our backyard that reminded us of when my wife Susan and when her mother passed, and we were with her, and that's been about 12 or 13 years ago. This is called Back There. A quiet light was lifting the leaves near the edge of our yard. It reminded us of that moment after your mother died. It was early, and she had just passed when the sun slipped through the blinds across her face, and all the urgency left the room. It made her glow like an angel with a corona on a Renaissance wall. Her whole life had landed like the cinder of a meteor that was filling us with peace. We were suddenly on the inside of everything. The light through the leaves brought us there again. We reached across all we have been through to touch each other's hand briefly. So part of saying yes to life is when that beautiful moment appears, whether it's through the death of a loved one or the surprise of beauty. That's an opening that invites us to find it elsewhere. And part of saying yes is the gift of that hard, bittersweet gift of feeling that peace in the moment after Eleanor passed. It was waiting for us elsewhere in the world. It wasn't restricted to her passing. So this too is part of saying yes to life, from brokenness to tenderness. This poem is called Before. When I had wings, I never thought about where to fly. Flying was enough. And when my wings became the folds in my heart, I never thought about where things were heading. Feeling was enough. And when my heart first flew up and out my mouth, I never thought about hesitating. Being tender and speaking was enough. Let me read that one again. Before, when I had wings, I never thought about where to fly. Flying was enough. And when my wings became the folds in my heart, I never thought about where things were heading. Feeling was enough. And when my heart first flew up and out my mouth, I never thought about hesitating. Being tender and speaking was enough.
Would you do the last bit again?
And when my heart first flew up and out my mouth, I never thought about hesitating. Being tender and speaking was enough. And so this is the last poem of this opening set, and then we can have a conversation. And I'll read this one twice as well. This is called Inside Everything. Keep trying to hide, and in time you become a wall. Keep trying to love, and in time you become love. Our journey on earth is to stop hiding so we can become love. Everything else is a seduction and a distraction. Courage is staying true. Inside everything. Keep trying to hide, and in time you become a wall. Keep trying to love, and in time you become love. Our journey on earth is to stop hiding so we can become love. Everything else is a seduction and a distraction. Courage is staying true. So let's take a breath.
And then some of the books that are back there?
Actually, most of these are newish. So,
I just love that last one.
I'm sorry?
I love that last one.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So let's take a breath and let's have a conversation. How are you doing? What's going on? What's on your heart as you arrive here this weekend? Ask all the questions I can't answer. Yes, Julian.
So I think that everything you were just saying is answers the question that I have, but I wonder if I can hear it more directly. So if that's possible. So this inner critic has always been a very mysterious and awful thing for me. Sometimes it's just not there for long periods of time, but often it's there. So when I was younger especially, but still to this day, I used to just outrun it with accomplishment. Just try to drown it out. I'm going to achieve so much that thing will leave me alone forever. And then I burn out, because I'm like, I can't sustain that. So, and then other ways would be just distracting it, either through wonderful art or filling away time doing nothing. But sometimes I could transform it through writing stories or writing somebody a meaningful letter. But so I'm asking you directly, what do you think is the best way to deal with that? And it must have some purpose, and the last one you read, there was a piece about courage with it, so I know courage is involved. Will you comment on that?
Yeah. So when we talk about the inner critic, we are also talking about, and that's why I asked that question, who's the largest voice in your head that's not your own? So in all societies, especially in modern society, and sometimes it's intentional, often it's not, but there is always this voice that's installed to basically keep us in line. I mean, right? Even right? Santa knows. Santa's watching. What? Some old guy in the North Pole is watching if I'm good? Really? So, but what that does is we start to unconsciously, rather than listen to our own direct experience of life, what brings us alive, we start looking to please and not disappoint the watcher. And that gets installed in us. That gets installed in us, and then we are constantly, and so this leads to what is a very menacing assumption that all human beings struggle with, and that is the assumption that life is other than where we are. It's over there. If I could just get over there. And that's not just here to there. That's not just like, gee, if I could just go to India and study, then I'll, whatever you want to put on it. But it's also with ideals. It's with ideals or a better image of yourself. If I could just become this, but that's still putting a line. It doesn't mean we don't work toward things, that we don't try to better ourselves, that we don't, but it's the engagement that brings us alive, which is why the writing helps. It's the wholehearted engagement in life that reconnects us directly to what it is to be here, that removes the veils. And we all struggle with both, because it's easy, even without parents and all other influences, it's easy to make a dream your own watcher. Oh, I failed at that. Oh, if I could only be what I imagine my best self could be then. When it's, again, the engagement that keeps us real. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I wanted to say that it's, for me, when I could sort of,
the microphone so that people online.
Yeah, let's use the microphones.
for me, when I started to imagine the dialogue that's going on and all the yabits, I put myself as if I were a lifeguard up here being a supportive, non-judgmental observer. And you realize that, and again, it's like the circle, clockwise circle. And as the circle goes round, it begins to go counterclockwise. Wait a minute. Got to learn how to make stone soup and realize that each of us has a slightly different point of view. And what a gift it is when we combine the gifts. Wow.
Yeah, thank
To
you.
look at yourself objectively. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
What did you learn from it?
Yes, Maureen, did you want to?
I just want to, go ahead, but I just wanted to say that we have a comment, a
Sure.
question from online.
Yeah.
And it's from Sloan. And Sloan is saying, Mark, in your poem, Inside Everything, you say, stop hiding so we can become love. I understand. And would like you to say more as a way of expanding the quote's impact?
Sure, sure. And then we'll get to your, yeah. So I think that we all, D.H. Lawrence in a poem called Self-Protection asked the question, is the best self-protection hiding who you are or being who you are? And I think it's being who you are. And so we have this impulse to hide, to protect ourselves. And that's sometimes we do, but there's a difference between hiding and removing yourself from danger. I can, if there's a dog that is a vicious dog on a leash, removing myself from danger is moving myself beyond the range of the leash or the chain. That's different than hiding. So, I remember years ago I was at some party with artists, and it was one of those things where it was like a cocktail party, and somebody came in who I didn't know, who was very, full of himself and acerbic, and my immediate reaction was, well, I'm not playing this game, and I didn't physically move, but I backed up, and I thought that I was removing myself from the situation. But later when I left, I realized I was hiding myself. No one else would have known, but hiding myself is diminishing. Removing yourself from what is dangerous is not about hiding who you are. And we have to learn personally what that difference is, which is one of the works of self-awareness. Because it's a reflex. If something's dangerous, you pull back. But then we have the capacity to say, okay, what did I just do? Was that really protecting myself, or was that reflexive? How do I best protect myself and not diminish who I am? And that becomes an ongoing practice of self-knowledge. So I'll pause there. Thank you. Yes?
I'm not sure what poem it was, but you said something about releasing our grievances.
Yeah, that was the antique dresser, yeah.
It just feels connected with everything that you're talking about. And it's a way of hiding in a way. And it's probably about fear. But it interferes with love.
Yeah. So let's talk a moment about that, okay? Thank you. So I think that we can be preoccupied, so let's say for an example, if there's a bully across the street, if I avoid the bully or I go over to beat up the bully, my path is still governed by the presence of the bully. And the same with our wound. I mean, wounds hurt. Wounds stay with us. And there's a process of healing. But how do we, so when I say let go of our grievances, it's not something we can just say, oh, well, it's not that easy. Everybody has their journey with it. I'll give you my own personal example. My parents were gone now about 10 years. And I have to say, you know, since they're gone, I'm understanding them more because now that they're gone, they're quieter. They made a lot of noise when they were here. And, but when I was in my 40s, and you know, I had difficult growing up and whatnot, but whatever that was, I found myself healing kind of naturally in my 40s, and I kept keeping those wounds open, those grievances open. And you know, like the way if a scab is healing and you pick it and it keeps bleeding. And I started to wonder, like, what am I doing? And I realized when I was really honest with myself, I was keeping the evidence alive for a trial that would never come. I wanted there to be fresh evidence so that, you know, they could see how I was hurt. Never mind that I was healing from it. Okay. So that led me to the question, I was being asked in that moment to choose justice or healing. Now, in beautiful moments, individually and in the world, throughout history, justice and healing lead to each other, and at some moments they become the same thing. But my experience has been that that doesn't always happen, and there are sometimes in the journey we're challenged to choose for the moment one or the other. So in my effort to want justice, I kept hurting myself. So this is what I mean about the journey, not the decision. It's not that easy, but the journey by being authentic, of allowing our grievances to find their rightful place. Because this is the other thing, and then I'll pause on, you know, a lot of things you're asking will bookmark for the weekend, because they're conversations that we can go deeply into. They're all worthy conversations. So, and this touches on just one notion of forgiveness, which for me, and I admit I don't know a whole lot about that. I've had trouble with it in my own life, but what I've understood forgiveness to be is the journey. So the word actually means exchange. It means to give for. So what are we giving and what is it for? Well, I think what we're exchanging when we can, and this is not about between you and me, this is in here. I'm trying to exchange my hurt and woundedness to regain the full use of my heart. So imagine the heart is a pie, and 15% is preoccupied with this wound or series of wounds. And that's what trauma is. Trauma, maybe you can't exchange all of it. Maybe you have to learn to live with 88%. These are big things. But wherever possible, where I can exchange, meaning process, face, in my, like letting go. No, don't keep picking the scab if it's naturally healing. If it's not, that's another thing. But then I need to trying to exchange that 15% of woundedness when my heart is preoccupied with that, so I have 100% or as much as I can of my heart to live. To live. Now, like so many things that we talk about, does anybody know how to do this? No. That's why we're together. We're all learning together. We try and we fail and we try again, and maybe this worked for me or maybe it won't work for you, but there's a little part of what you said, maybe it would work for me. Thank you.
For you, it seems like a conduit to doing that, to going through that process is your writing and teaching. Is that right?
Yeah, so and this is where over the years I have discovered that the creative process is very, very similar, if not the same thing as the introspective process. I just happen to write it down. But the real, it's the same. It's why when you write, it helps quiet the watcher, because you're not imagining life, you're living it. And so when I can, how I learn is by, I'm not writing what I know, I'm exploring what I don't know. And if I'm honest, I'm rewarded with insight, which becomes my teacher. And then I have to be with it. So definitely. But the poem, before the words are on the page, the poem has already happened. The words are just a trail.
Mark, can you just repeat that line? The creative process is very similar.
If not identical to the introspective process of how we, again, if we follow what is true to us, it could be a moment of awe, a moment of clarity, a moment of confusion, a moment of fear. It could be pain, loss, grief. But if we're true to it, it will usually lead us to an insight or to something that will feel true that we have to stay in conversation with to be our teacher.
Then I have a question. Is that, it's just a short question. Is that then what feeds you to write so many books? That's phenomenal to imagine that many books.
Yeah, I've been blessed to be prolific, and one of the reasons is I learned how to get out of the way.
That's it.
And as I'm saying, I write to explore what I don't know. If I had only written about what I know, I would have written very little. So it is a process of discovery and trusting what we discover, not having it fit our map already. I was in a group, and one of the folks in the group, I shared a story, an ancient story, and with real trying to really grasp it, she had said, well, I'm having trouble. I have a problem with that story. And it led me to say, well, I invite you, rather than to make the story fit the rooms of your mind, to open your mind to what you have a problem with and enlarge your house. So that's for all of us. We all do that. We all do that. That's not singling her out. I don't use her as an example that she did anything wrong. That's being human. Our first reaction is, how does this fit? When we're often being asked, no, how do I open up, not make it fit? How do I open up to welcome it?
The wonderful word resentment, you choose to feel and to refeel as opposed to dropping the rock.
Yeah, thank
When
you.
you refeel, you're carrying resentments, you don't understand, but to refeel,
Yeah,
now.
yeah, thank you.
Yesterday's a canceled check, tomorrow's a promissory note, today is cash in hand. That's why it's called the present. Enjoy it present, spend it now. And if you do now, turn that word around. You have W-O-N.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
I
more?
was going to share.
Yeah,
a comment
go ahead.
online. This is from Linda, and she said, "You have no idea how comforting and helpful your words are, Mark. I am grieving a process of healing, not hiding, and over again checking in with part of something to make sure that that's the case. Sometimes I'm not sure, and that too is part of the process."
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, absolutely. We're never sure. Wisdom is not a shortcut, it's a support. Yeah, so, yeah, Deb?
I'm new to you, so I'm hearing in a way that I haven't heard before. Not necessarily everything new, but I'm hearing it differently. And what came up for me as I was listening and really feeling my heart open was the word permission. And sorry. The word permission, and how important it is to allow myself, give myself permission to open, to be, to know, to hear, to be courageous.
Yeah.
And so that's what was really striking for me, was that permission.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that notion of permission also comes, like that goes back to those voices that are on our own, like who are we asking permission of? You know, who's telling us we can't, supporting, and I left my home when I was 18, so I'm 73, so who's been keeping those voices alive? It's been me. I've done probably a better job than they did. They only had 18 years. I've had, 60 something more.
To keep replaying those. Well, I just feel like this little batch of notes right here is just juicy with things, and I like this thing called learning how to get out of the way, and that we write to explore what we don't know. I mean, I just see the tandem of that, because most of the writing that we've ever been cultivated into through our schooling or whatever is to give information, to tell the story well, to make sure the listener can understand the story. All that takes up so much psychogram just doing it. And before you know it, we slip into, I was just writing about my grandmother yesterday, as a matter of fact. The prompt that was given in the course, where do I come from, was I come from you. Mambo is her name. So from there I wrote how I came from her. And it did fully move into writing into a place I didn't know. I mean, it was so cool to have these entry points. So where I hope you will give us information along the way, maybe not right now, is how you've learned over the years how to get out of your way. I mean, one way is meditation. I've meditated a lot of years. And then you've been through a major illness in your life. That's one thing I know about you. And I'm a widow with my husband having died with cancer. So I watched him get out of his own way in order to move to the next thing of his life, which was the transformation of death. And as I watched it, I at one point said to him, why wouldn't I want this for you? Because I'm watching this amazing process of transformation. So, having said that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's all good. And that even in our egos who want, I mean, this little paragraph right here, who wants to grab all of our wisdom and say, here's a quotable, here's something I can say when someone else is going through grief. Because I have cultivated many of those because of 3 years of, of experiencing something I could have never have imagined how it would take shape and form. That wisdom is not a shortcut, but a support. I mean, that's profound.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for sharing all that.
So any more you want to say to that, I'm happy to sit
and
here
I
and
will,
take
throughout
notes.
the weekend, I will talk, because again, getting out of the way in terms of writing is also the same as getting out of the way in terms of being fully here.
Right.
So we'll touch on that throughout the whole.
It's really the whole game.
Yeah, and I think that, what I've learned about, which is humbling, is that yes, wisdom doesn't shortcut being human. I can share with you, we can have this profound time, I might seem clear to you, I'll go home on Monday, get off the plane, trip taking the garbage out, forget everything I said to you and have to learn it all over again. And isn't that wonderful?
That's very encouraging. But it's not just us, that's good.
What else would we do? That's the noble, messy journey of being a spirit and a body in time and earth. That's wonderful. Yes, in the moment it'll be frustrating. That's what the whole last book, Falling Down and Getting Up, was about. Yes, we go, thank you. Oh, okay. Okay, anyone?
Lee, did you?
Oh, wait, there is something.
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
How do I know when I am out of the way?
Well, I think that, what that is the barometer of our authenticity, which no one can tell for you, but we build on our own legitimate experience. That is, I know what a moment of joy is. I know what a moment of pain is. This is where it's like so crazy in our world about this dispute about there's no truth anymore. If I stick my hand in the water, I don't need you to tell me it's wet. There are facts. Now, we can talk about the interpretation of those facts, but there are facts. And so we build, this is also the work of self-awareness. We build on what we know to be true, even if we don't understand it. So we know we're out of the way when we have that direct connection with life. When there's nothing between my heart and the world, whether that's with another, whether that's in the peace of a moment, whether that's in the presence of beauty or grief. And so then we can build on that so that even if it's a new sensation, I can have things I can say, yeah, I recognize this. This feels true. And then the work of self-awareness is paying attention. Oh, I don't feel this. What's going on? So, I'm committed to being wholehearted, but I'm human. So there are times I'm half-hearted. I'm tired, I'm in pain, I'm confused, I'm worried, whatever it might be. And part of the work of self-awareness, the practice, is to say, oh, I recognize this. What's in the way? What do I have to give attention to recover that authenticity moment? And so I can't tell you how to do it, but each of us has to kind of learn through the case study of our individual lives. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I'm back with the example of being at the cocktail party and the person, because I had a question then, and the person who was very inflated, and you described yourself as backing away, feeling like you were stepping away from, but realizing you were, closing yourself off. And I was wondering what it would look like for you to have stepped away but not closed yourself off. What would that have looked like that was different?
Well, and again, thank you for that question. So again, this is not about, sometimes it might require or it might feel true to say something. But in that example, it's not, no one would know if I was hiding or present but me. So it was about me not vanishing. So how do I stay present and not hide, even though I don't feel comfortable with what's going on in front of me? So that's a practice. That's a practice. What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do I stand firm in what I know and who I am?
I want to know, what does that look like?
Well,
What does that feel like?
So I
find myself in those situations backing away, but I am wanting to live from a present, full-hearted place. So then, how do I create that?
So one of the things that I would offer for all of us is, and that's the wonderful thing about being human, is we can recognize and practice. So the next time you're in a situation like that and you have an awareness of it, that you're backing away, just in yourself, forget the other person, lean back in. What does that feel like? What does it feel like to stand in what you know to be true, regardless of the wind of this bombastic person or whatever in front of you? And to experiment with that, so you extend your self-knowledge. And so, all these questions are wonderful, and one of the things, and then we'll get to stand, one of the things that is, I think is such a humbling, beautiful thing is that, like, all your questions already are wonderful. Every question invites a practice, not an answer. So you've just invited a beautiful practice. So the next time, stand there and say, okay, I'm going to experiment with this. What does it feel like if I come back in, even without saying anything, and see how that feels? Yeah, Stan?
So going back to the cocktail party situation, I think for me, the answer would be somehow to let go of the judgment I'm feeling towards that person. It sort of makes us the same.
Sure. And that frees you to be who you are. So there's infinite ways, and thank you. So we're all sharing already, this is what works for me. This is what works for me. Yeah, there's no one way. Yep. Yeah, thank you.
One of the things that I love to do is say, cover yourself with honey butter so things roll off. Because it isn't how they act, it's how we react that gets us in trouble. And believe me, if somebody expects you to, how high, and you don't do it, it throws them off kilter. You don't have to react to everything.
Yeah.
It's just to let it slide.
Yeah.
I've been in that situation, and you can drive somebody half nuts because you're not doing what you're supposed to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Other things that are on your heart or mind here? Yes, Deirdre?
I'm back at the Make a Bigger House.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, okay, if I make a bigger house, then that means the inner critic gets a room, or my parents get a room, and so then the practice is like every day, how do I walk out to the garden and pass them and say, oh, I hope you've enjoyed your morning tea, and just keep going, rather than I'm not really sure what my question is, but it's like, how do we invite that in, recognize it's a practice, but not like make ourselves do it every day?
So what I would offer, that's a beautiful question. And what that invites is, I would go back and invite, the first question is, who do you want to have a room? You don't have to give anybody a room you don't want. You're not obligated to give your parents a room. No, it's your house. So it's a difference between opening your house to the forces of the universe, to truth, to beauty, to the mystery. But you're not obligated to have a room for your parents or to anyone who's hurt you. That is your own looking at, and then like as Stan mentioned, then you can look at your own thing about justice or healing or judgment. And even if you do have a house, if your house and your inner property is big enough, you can give them a little shed on the other side of the hill, okay? It all comes from your authenticity, and so that's another level of the voices that are telling us what's expected. So that it invites a good question, right? Yeah, you're not obligated to do anything that's not. See, I've discovered for me anyway that I spent a lot of time, like many of us, early in life, trying to be good. But in trying to be good, I wasn't always authentic. And when I learned, pretty much on the other side of my cancer journey, that if I was authentic, I was always good. So I shifted my commitment, my vow, to be authentic, because I think we are naturally kind. So in the way that a flame gives off heat, it doesn't try to give off heat. By being a flame, it automatically gives off heat. So by being authentic, we automatically give off kindness and care, unless it's blocked. But if I try to be good and try to please the watcher and make sure Santa thinks I'm a good boy, I'm not always kind. I'm not always real. So for me, that really made a huge difference in my life and allowed my natural kindness and care to just flow. Maureen?
I just have a real, can I just share this really sweet comment?
Yeah.
This is from I've put my glasses back on. It's from Heidi Rentz. And she just said, Mark, I believe you are an angel sent to us from heaven. I am thankful for this gift. And then she just said, I live in Seattle. So it's just nice. And then there's one other comment from Linda. Also, from your own love for yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but in a way that gives respect to and for yourself, in a way that doesn't put others who are not respectful or kind to you above yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's part of it, is how do we care and honor ourselves and put ourselves in the equation of any situation. And I think that's hard for a lot of us to do. But one way that's helped me through the years, if I'm considering a situation and the needs and feelings of others, and I kind of put myself last, well, I think, oh, what if my position was that of a child? How would I respond? I would protect that child. And then I started to treat the whole thing. No, what I'm feeling and need is part of the consideration. It's not last. And that's not egotistical. That's letting love go in all directions. Yes?
About making a bigger house, that's so I don't hide. It's so I'm not diminished, that I can expand and hold all the love and light.
Yeah.
And there's room for everybody.
There's room for everybody. This is one of the paradoxes about living. There's room for everybody, but it also doesn't mean that you put yourself in the way of harm. So, right, so, you know, if your parents in your mind or in your heart, you know, are not at a place where they're able to, you know, relate in an unhurtful way, well, you don't give them a room. They got to earn that room. So there's a paradox that you know, yes, I want to be open-hearted and have no judgment, and at the same time, I have to be. I'm also living in the world, and it's not an either-or. It's both. So I like to think about, and we'll talk about this more through the weekend, that I think of the heart as an inner sun, S-U-N. It's emanating light all the time. You know, the great teaching of the sun is that it emanates light and warmth in all directions without preference. What a great teacher. And we have to keep our heart constant. We never muffle or put out the inner light. But I live in the world, so that means I do have to consider not be in the way of harm. I do have to make choices. But I think the choices are, do I open the blinds or close the blinds? Do I have shutters if there's a hurricane coming, or do I keep the windows open? But the light is never snuffed. So that's the inner responsibility, and the outer responsibility is a practice for each of us. What that looks like for each of us, that's the journey of our own wisdom. So yeah, so that's how do we, right. So do have to make choices. Is it safe to share with you? We have to earn that trust with each other. But that's what I meant about vanishing versus being present, because I thought I was just closing the blinds at that cocktail party, and I was starting to snuff my own light. No, that's dangerous.
I want to talk about the cocktail party again. I was glad you brought that up. Well, okay, so back to these great little nuggets that I write down that you say. Look for companions who have opened their hearts, where I am you and you are me. So now I think about the annoying person that we want to just get away from at the party. And the truth is, he is me and I am him. So who am I really walking away from? And if I shift my mirror, because maybe he has no clue what that is, to curiosity, And watchfulness, like, whoa, maybe that's what I look like sometimes when I get a little full of myself. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Take that in. You know, like that. And so I am missing a chance when I just want to bolt,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, thank you.
build a wall.
Yeah, thank you.
So, because, I mean, this is true. Where I am you and you are me always exists.
Well,
That's what we're living into, is that knowing. Right?
yeah. Well, I think it's, you know, we all have, yes, and we all have different patterns and stages of growth. So this is how we can miss each other, which is different than someone resisting and pushing away. You know, we can just be, and it's not our place to judge the growth of, you know, there's this, I can't remember who it was. I think Anthony DeMello was a priest who wrote a few beautiful books. But he had this one image that he had seen a butterfly that in his mind was stuck. It wasn't coming out of the cocoon. In his mind, he thought it was too slow, so he was going to help it. So he breathed on it to help it, and it came out prematurely and died. Yeah, that says it all. It's not our job to judge how long it takes for anyone to grow. It's our job to keep each other company. Well, let me, yes, go ahead.
It was said so well, to thine own self be true, and it shall follow as the night the day thou canst to no man be false. That's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I think, any other pressing questions right now before I might move us to, yes? Yeah. Sure. No, don't hurry. That's what we're here for.
You made a statement that made me kind of sit up straight. You said, I believe we are all, oh my goodness. You said, I believe we are all, what's the word you use, kind?
Yeah,
Essentially
yes,
kind,
yes.
innately kind.
Yes.
And I agree with that statement wholeheartedly, but I was under a lot of teaching as a young child that believed, like taught the exact opposite of that. So my question is just simply, how do you know we're innately kind?
Well, I can't prove it to you. I can't give you an explanation. But this has been a challenging argument since the beginning of time. There have been one side of folks who say, hey, you know, we're not, you know, we're worse than animals. If we don't have rules and controls and things in place, we're going to just, you know, we're evil. And then there's the other side that have said, no, we're innately kind, and it's the things that block that innate kindness, that, you know, shortcut it, that impede its growth, and we need to get those out of the way and just let us be who we are. Now, I am obviously of that persuasion. I can't prove it to you, and I think, and nor do I want to. I think that when we experience kindness, you know, there was a Chinese philosopher, Mencius, from the 3rd century, Mencius, who was also of this, in the lineage of that side of things. And he had this beautiful metaphor. He said, you know, the way water, if allowed its true nature, will always flow downhill and join other water. It can be manipulated to go uphill, even upside down, through pipes. That direct experience of life, that innate kindness. And, you know, I think you don't need to persuade people. I think that great love and great suffering have always been the great teachers that return us to our innate kindness. And, you know, the people who are not kind, I don't mean this in a bad way, but they haven't been loved enough or have not suffered enough. So, are we in a good place? I can share some more as we move on, or you can.
Just one last.
Yeah, sure.
Elizabeth said, check out Dick Schwartz, No Bad Parts. I
Oh, yeah, thank you. So Dick Schwartz was the founder of family systems therapy, which some of you know about, that looks at, we have so many different parts in us and all have voices, and our job is how do we listen to them and integrate them, and in my language, not his, how do we become the conductor of that orchestra? How do we do that? I have a dear, dear friend who is one of the oldest facilitators, practitioners in that, that form of therapy. His name is Paul Ginter. Well, thank you. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. And let's bookmark some of those questions. We can go more deeply tomorrow. So let me share some things. And on this kind of closing set, I want to open with a quote from the Gnostic Gospels. And the quote is, "If you bring out what is inside of you, what is inside of you will save you. If you fail to bring out what is inside you, what is inside you will destroy you." If you bring out what is inside of you, what is inside of you will save you. If you fail to bring out what is inside of you, what is inside of you will destroy you. Ancient Anonymous insight. So this poem is called "In the City." In the endless flow of streets, this one keeps taking a purse on a counter, a phone sticking out of a pocket, a wallet dropped in a hurry, and 4 blocks over, another gives, leaving a hat in the cold, buying coffee for a stranger, and listening to someone in despair. This is a telling chromosome of the give and take we are each born with. One day, we are the cold that hardens, the next, the light needing to fill the dark. And sometimes, in what the ancients called a moment of grace, the one compelled to give places his offering right in the hands of the one about to take. You know, there's a wonderful story. There's a Japanese wonderful poet, monk named Ryokan, and who had very little. Most of those guys didn't have very much. Lived in a hut, lived in a monastery for a while, but then he lived in a hut on the side of a mountain. And he went, one of these guys would wander, and he came back after wandering and walking, and there he came upon, when he came home, there was a thief in his hut. And the thief was frustrated because there was nothing to steal, really. And Ryokan said, "Oh, you've gone to all this trouble. Let me give you my coat." This is a little story called Leaning In. Every time Joe started out, things didn't go his way. He began to feel cursed. Soon it was everyone else's fault. He was becoming bitter. His favorite uncle, who had been through war and cancer, got wind of this and went to visit him. They took a long walk during which Joe replayed all his complaints. When he had nothing left to say, his uncle took his glasses off and hugged him for a long spell. When he could feel his nephew soften, he leaned in and said, "If you keep this up, it will consume you." They walked on and came to the edge of a waterfall where his uncle continued and said, "Not having things go our way is not a tragedy." They watched the water rush over the falls against its will. After a time, his uncle, who had been remade more than once, stared into the water and offered softly, "Life keeps pulling the script from our hands." He turned to his nephew and whispered, "You can't write and memorize your part. You have to live it." Amen.
What was the line in that about being consumed by it?
If you keep this up, it will consume you. If you keep this up, it will consume you. And this is a poem it was written to a dear friend and who was going through a difficult time and really was, their center had moved to a place of despair. And they had asked me, like, well, how can you see that there's anything good here? And I acknowledged their despair, but it led to this poem called Between the Wall and the Flame. You ask, how can you believe in anything when there's pain everywhere? And I see the pain in your face. I have no answer any more than day can make its case in the middle of the night. Yes, things are breaking constantly, and people bent from their nature are cruel, and our desperation leads us to an excess that is even too heavy for the planet to bear. Yet, I am in a wine bar in Hell's Kitchen against a brick wall, and the flame from the oil lamp is letting the wall whisper its long history. And somehow, in that lighted inch of brick, what matters flickers, and I feel everything. Something between the wall and the flame flutters like a butterfly, carrying the secret of peace, unseen, unnoticed. And even seeing it and feeling it briefly, I don't know how to speak of it. It's as if under the earthquake of existence, an infinite hand holds the ball of fire that is the world. Oh, now someone nearby pokes me and asks, so are you talking about God? Oh, this is beyond anything I have a concept for. We're like small urchins churned over in the surf of time. There's so much more than we can know, but I see you are still hurting, so I'll stop talking. Come, put your head on my shoulder.
Is this a new one, Mark?
Is this what?
Is this a new one?
That was actually inside the miracle.
Okay, I read that.
Yeah. And what that taught me is while all of that helped me have some peace with the mixed truth of what it is to be here, none of that was helping my dear friend. And so I needed to stop talking and say, put your head on my shoulder. You don't need to understand this the way I do. You just need me to be there. I needed that, but that was for me. This is, I was sharing with Carolyn and Hank just yesterday about this moment that happened when I was last teaching in Mexico at the airport coming home. The airport was Los Cabos, which is a huge airport, just filled with hundreds of people. So this was this moment. This is called the Sage of Los Cabos. Boarding a plane in I thought that was okay. I thought that was someone saying something. This was with hearing aids. You hear everything, you just don't know what it is. Yeah. The Sage of Los Cabos. Boarding a plane in Los Cabos, I noticed the gate agent's ring and heard myself whisper, "Oh, that's so beautiful." Enrique dropped everything and took it off while everyone was waiting. It was a coiled silver dragon with a red jewel in its mouth. He said, "My father gave it to me." He started to well up. I leaned in and he went on. He took me to him and he said, "My magnificent boy, the dragon outside will kill you and the one inside will save you. Wear this ring so you might know the difference." Enrique slipped the ring back on. I had to board and I never saw him again. And as I sat on the plane, it felt like generations of knowing had surfaced in that moment. From Enrique to his father, to whatever experiences through the ages have led to the understanding that there's a confusing territory between being devoured by life and being saved by life. And we are ever challenged to discern what is life-giving and what is life-draining. What will let our gifts emerge and what will slowly diminish us? Which dragon do you see out the window and which in the back of your eye? And that amazing moment, so here's another example of that kind of connect. This was the same pause that I mentioned in the poem that's under everything, the same moment that was in the moment after Susan's mother Eleanor passed, was suddenly in this moment where here I am, hundreds of people, and I just gasped at this ring, and all of a sudden, this man, Enrique, didn't matter how many people were waiting, he said, let's go there. And we went there, and it was profound. And then I never saw it, and then the moment closed up again. And I never saw him again. But what a lesson. What a lesson. This is also a case study of saying yes to life. If I had muffled my being surprised by the beauty of that ring, he would have, and then he said yes by, let me tell you about this ring. It's more important than everybody waiting online. So we both somehow said yes to life, and look at the amazing lesson that surfaced from it.
And isn't it kind of like the Gnostic phrase that you started?
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is a newer poem. Let me see here where we are. This is a poem called Slipping Through the Bars, like the bars of a cage. So this has to do with our challenges of being blocked, of being entangled. There is a flat, broken stone by the river where my great-grandfather decided it was time to leave Russia. 100 years later, another bruised soul sat on that stone struggling with where to go. And today, in the brick shadow of the Statue of Liberty, a mother of 3 is falling out of love, staring through the fire escape, as deeply in exile as a blind man in prison. How to emigrate from this? I can't say. But I know there are times when all must be given up to become Adam or Eve all over again. This is more about shedding than running, more about dismantling all the prisons, the ones constructed centuries ago and the ones we love so much, we build them ourselves. This is more about shedding than running, more about dismantling all the prisons, the ones constructed centuries ago and the ones we love so much, we build them ourselves. So, there's an old Zen story in just 2 sentences. It says, "Why is the road to freedom so long?" asked the troubled apprentice. And the master replied, "Because it has to go through you." "Why is the road to freedom so long?" asked the troubled apprentice. And the master replied, "Because it has to go through you." Now, when I first heard that years ago, I thought, ouch, geez, that's, I thought of it as a very critical response. But all these years later, I understand it wasn't, I don't think it was critical, I think it was a geographical response. Because it has to go through you, and each of us is an entire continent. And it takes time to traverse that continent. So I don't think it was as critical as it first seemed. And this is very new. I just wrote this the other day, or retrieved it the other day. It's called The Way of Gifts, and it's also a story poem, The Way of Gifts. I was given a walnut statue of Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion. I kept her on my desk for weeks, long enough to notice that the grain along her neck was lighter. And one morning, it was as if she said, "You must now pass me to another." But who, I thought. The next morning she answered, "You will know. This is the way of gifts." So I carried her with me in the mountains and to the sea. I put her next to the window wherever I slept. No one stepped forward. I even left her on the mossy path of redwoods, but I couldn't leave the parking lot and went back to get her. Then I began approaching strangers who seemed in pain, asking if they wanted her. They thought I was homeless. In my confusion, I sat on a park bench and held her to my chest like a lost version of my soul. It was then an old woman came up to me. She said, "I've been waiting for someone to hold something so dearly that it might release our love back into the world." I've been waiting for someone to hold something so dearly that it might release our love back into the world. So this is a good example again of, I didn't know where this was going. I was following it as truthfully as I could. And so the lesson at the end of that poem for me is that it wasn't about passing on the statue of Kuan Yin. The only way to pass it on was to become Kuan Yin. And when the me in the poem, not being able to find someone to give it to, finally held Kuan Yin to my chest so completely, in that moment I became Kuan Yin. And that is what we need to release our love back into the world. Let me read this poem again. The Way of Gifts. I was given a walnut statue of Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion. I kept her on my desk for weeks, long enough to notice that the grain along her neck was lighter. And one morning, it was as if she said, "You must now pass me to another." But who, I thought. The next morning she answered, "You will know. This is the way of gifts." So I carried her with me in the mountains and to the sea. I put her near the window wherever I slept. No one stepped forward. I even left her on the mossy path of redwoods, but I couldn't leave the parking lot and went back for her. Then I began approaching strangers who seemed in pain, asking if they wanted her. They thought I was homeless. In my confusion, I sat on a park bench and held her to my chest like a lost version of my soul. It was then an old woman came up to me. She said, "I've been waiting for someone to hold something so dearly that it might release our love back into the world."
Did that really happen?
Did that really happen? Somewhere it did.
Okay.
It's happening right here and right now.
Well, I just wondered, was it really a woman that walked up and said that to you? That
Well,
was like, oh.
I think one of the ways of getting out of the way over the years is honoring the truth, whether it happens in this world or others.
I agree. I love that.
So, I was struck by this statue that someone had given me. And as I reflected on it, it started to tell me the story. So my job is not to say, is that real or not? It's true. It's true whether it happened in this dimension or in dreams or in my heart. And my job, part of the authenticity, is to follow what is true. Otherwise, that's making it fit the rooms of my house. So I follow what is true, and then it leads me to this. And then it becomes my teaching. So I'm concerned with what is true more than whether it is fact or fiction. That's an arbitrary distinction that is often made by people who are uncomfortable with the mystery. Can I explain? I can't.
I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah, I can't explain where it comes from any more than I can explain why I believe that people are good. But I know it's true.
We have to grow from kindergarten to people garden. You know, a garden of people. They rode off into the sunset, lived happily ever after. BS. They rode off into the sunset and grew rich with the experience of living life one day at a time. When you think about a garden, to have a good garden, you have to fertilize it. You have to pull the weeds out. Even trim it. Again? Well, I had a bath last month. It's that ongoing growing. Now. And if you're now, turn it around. You want
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Years ago, you told us everything is true.
Yes.
And every time we have a fight, we say that.
Well, thank you. I think.
Less often than we used to, but
Yeah.
we all, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think, that has been one of my great teachers of the last 15, 20 years, is that all things are true. All things aren't fair or just, but all things are true. Well, let me share a couple more, and then we'll call it a night. So this is a poem that is called What the Stillness Says in the Evening. What the Stillness Says in the Evening. My father was gentler in his 80s. Life had worn him through, and he had become a flute. I could finally listen into him. Approaching death, he showed me how to welcome rather than choose. Now I can see that the stones in the way, if walked on enough, become a path. And the heart, if kept open, becomes a garden for those who stay and those who pass through. I only know that when I gave up on being great, the timeless truths rushed through me like wind through tall grass. Sure. What the stillness says. Oh, wait a second here. Did I mix up things here? Hold on a second. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Got it. Okay. What the stillness says in the evening. My father was gentler in his 80s. Life had worn him through, and he had become a flute. I could finally listen into him. Approaching death, he showed me how to welcome rather than choose. Now I can see that the stones in the way, if walked on enough, become a path. And the heart, if kept open, becomes a garden for those who stay and those who pass through. I only know that when I gave up on being great, the timeless truths rushed through me like wind through tall grass. Well, let me share just a few others. So this was a poem that came, like I mentioned, my father passed, and the dog before the dog we have now, Mira, she passed within a year of when my father passed, and they had never really met, But I was in traffic one day where I live, toward the end of the day when that light was kind of gloaming. So this happened in this moment. And this is a mix of what happened and what didn't happen. In the sky of heart. This is also inside the miracle. It's late in the afternoon and I'm backed up in traffic, aching for my father and our dog, both gone. When the sun comes through and there above us a shelf of clouds shaped like an island edged by a waterfall, so real I can almost hear the rush of water falling into eternity. This mythic island in the sky stands by itself beckoning, and I understand why early people, overwhelmed with survival, might look up and believe that gods live in the sky. I am no different as I outweight the clouds of our trouble. Oh, someone is honking, but something stirs within, and I want to put the car in park and walk into the sky, to sit by the waterfall of time falling into everything. I think it's where we all go when the light turns green and the tires turn to wings and the steering wheels open into flowers. I think I hear my father throwing sticks to our dog at the bottom of the waterfall. Oh, someone else is honking. It's hard to go anywhere. And so by being true, so there's an example, being true to that moment led me to that moment. And then I felt and saw this imagined moment of my father playing with our dog. And now that image is part of my personal mythology. Even though they never met in real life.
So expanded. Why not?
It's so what?
It's so expanded.
Yeah.
It takes presence and expands the presence.
Well, this is, and we'll talk about this, but this is both in writing and in life. I mean, one of the purposes of art is to marry what is with what can be. And we'll talk more about that. So yeah, let me share two more, and we'll bring our evening to a close. What a wonderful, wonderful opening. Thank you so much for your presence. I can feel it, your wonderful, deep questions. And this is my dear wife, Susan, and we've been together about 30 years now. I should know the exact year, but this was written on our 28th year, so that obviously we're more than 28. This is called Our 28th Year. Yeah, it's that old great Maurice Chevalier song. It was summer, it was spring, I remember it well. Yeah. It was sunny, it was raining, I remember it well. I love the simplicities we've earned through the years, sitting on the deck in summer, huddled near the fire in winter, following the moon in autumn, tracing the long thread of stories we are a part of. Our love is perched in the vastness and grounded in the days. Like two feathers tied together, dropped from a cliff, we drift year to year through all the openness that life offers. Like two feathers tied together, dropped from a cliff, we drift, year to year, through all the openness that life offers. And finally tonight, this is called the...
What's the name of that? Can you just tell us the name?
Then that is called our 28th year.
Oh, of course. Okay.
Yeah. This is called The Blessed Work. And I wrote this just a few months ago. When I was young, I imagined a world much better than this. Looking for it, I broke many things and fell down many times, blaming this world, blaming you, blaming myself. But through the years, I lost things I thought were important and was suffered free of coverings. Now I can see the luminous world is always right here, and the blessed work is to part the veils and walk quietly in the miracle. I'll read this one more time. The blessed... I'll send you all time.
Are you going to send us all everything you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
That was just amazing.
Don't worry, I'm happy to share it. The blessed work. When I was young, I imagined a world much better than this. Looking for it, I broke many things and fell down many times, blaming this world, blaming you, blaming myself. But through the years, I lost things I thought were important and was suffered free of coverings, which brings us back to that innate goodness. Now I can see the luminous world is always right here, and the blessed work is to part the veils and walk quietly in the miracle. Well, thank you. A wonderful evening together, and I look forward to the weekend together too. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Goodness. We're feeling full, aren't we? Feeling full. We're feeling like pondering, because of course we're doing that. And we're feeling the blessing of sharing. You all have really deeply shared and been very present in doing that. Thank you. We look forward to more of that tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you for this bounty of new work you brought to us. We really appreciate that, don't we? Yes, let's just say that again. So we look forward to what tomorrow brings. We start at 10 in the morning. No need to come much earlier than that because we're a small group and you see your space. Maureen, you won't be here before 9:30, I don't think. Is that right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, we'll have coffee and tea here and plenty of water. And you have directions from Maureen for lunch planning for tomorrow. You might want to do that in advance tonight, just to be clear.
I did email everything to everybody, but I just thought about it, and I'll print those restaurants again. I've meant to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sandy, for being our wonderful volunteer, and Virginia and Julian, our board members, for being here with us, and Buxton Books for being here. So please pick up books that you'd like to have, and Mark can sign them tomorrow, since we're all coming back tomorrow. And then don't forget, there's a QR code, and you can pre-order the July book on friendship. Thank you, Larry. Also, I could see what a good video recording we're getting here. And Mark, once again, we're always blessed by the time, the deep sharing, and by what do you say? You just open so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.